Hey guys, Dr. Mark Lewis Johnson Sr. here. Welcome back again to the Patio Professor. Now we're looking at the Middle Ages. That's right, Middle Ages, 500 to 1500 AD. If you remember, let's go back. First of all, we have the Apostolic Age from 1 to 100. Second, then we have the Age of the Church Fathers from 100 to 500. And then we have now the Middle Ages from 500 to 1500. Then next up, we'll have the Puritan Age. No, Reformation. Reformation comes next because that's from 1500 to 1650. Then after the Reformation, then comes the Puritan Pietistic stage, and that's from 1650 to 1900. And then after that, we have the Great Age from 1900 to 2000. So we're halfway there. This is the middle ground, and I guess that's why this is called the Middle Age. But let's look into it because we got a lot going on here. This began with the fall of Rome in 476. And it ends with the fall of Constantinople in 1453. So we're talking about the Middle Ages. Middle Ages, there's a lot going on here. You got the fall of Rome in 476 and the fall of Constantinople in 1453. A lot of moving parts is going to make a big difference here as we start thinking through what this all means. Now, here we go. When you think of the Middle Ages, you got to think of the Roman society. Rome is that the center of society. You got feudalism going on here. So kings are granted lands to noblemen and bishops. Serfs work the land. Agriculture is picking up a little bit because innovations. You know, you have this 3-field crop rotation thing that they're making now, which improves the food and lessens demand for workers. So you have a lot of moving parts going on. You have like Johannes Gutenberg with the printing press. That's going to be important though, so pay close attention to that, particularly as we go to the Reformation age. We got to deal with Gutenberg's printing press around 1436. So we're still moving. There's a lot of great things going on. The population is starting to grow a little bit because of the innovation that's happening with some of the aqueducts in the areas in the region. Commercial economy starting to grow, which means you're gaining wealth in areas, which means the port cities are becoming particularly important because they are providing transportation on the water. And so that's going to be important because those populations will grow. By 1300, there were like 15 cities in Europe with a population of 50,000 or more. So let's go back. We're talking about, the Middle Ages from 5 to 15 AD. We're looking at about, by 1300, you had about 15 cities with 50,000 people in them. That's a good thing. And you'll start to see why later. However, even though it's a good thing, it can be a bad thing as well. The bubonic plague comes in. That's going to be important because you're getting all these populations together. And now we're talking about between 1347 and 1350, Black Death or the bubonic plague killed about 20 million people in Europe. That was 30% of the continent's population. So we find immediately, although these people were moving in from different areas, they're also bringing everything with them as well. And that was one of the bubonic plague was one to think about. Now, Muslims are coming onto the scene. By the time we start moving here after the Prophet Muhammad's death in 632 CE, the Muslim armies conquered large parts of the Middle East. So they were gaining a lot of ground, having a lot of traction. And at the height of its medieval world, the Muslims were more populated than all of Christendom. Say it again. So at its height, the medieval Islamic world was more than 3 times bigger than all of Christendom. So the Muslims took over and was having a huge difference along the way. All right. Cairo, Baghdad, and Damascus fostered a vibrant intellectual and cultural life. You start seeing poets and scientists and philosophers wrote thousands of books, all because they were eager and excited about this new culture that was going on. Scholars translated Greek into Aramaic, and then you had Indian texts into Arabic. Inventors devised technologies like the pinhole camera, soap, windmills, surgical instruments, a lot of moving parts here. So religious scholars and mystics translated and interpreted and taught in the Quran and other spiritual texts as well. All across the Middle East, you saw some moving happening and you knew something was going on. Towards the end of the 11th century, the Catholic Church began to authorize military expeditions or crusades to expel Muslims from the Holy Land. So again, remember, Muslims came in, they were the largest group. Now we have crusades going on by the Catholic Church to do something about it. The Crusaders believed that their service would guarantee the remission of their sins and ensure that they could spend all eternity into heaven. They also received more worldly rewards, such as papal protection and their property and forgiveness of some kinds of loan payments. So you immediately start to see that this was a very systematic way, a political way of setting things up for people to be a part of. And it was awfully interesting when you think about the cultures, is how the cultures mesh in enough ways so that they can be impactful in the city that they were in. So as we start to move through, many of them, however, were robbed, and as these visitors were coming, Christians were moving, they were being robbed and killed as they crossed through Muslim-controlled territories during the journey. During the Middle Ages, the only recognized religion was Christianity, though, especially the Catholic religion. The rise of monasticism contributed to the spread of the gospel, as monks often went out as missionaries. So they are spreading the gospel in their own ways. The fall of Acre in 1291 marked the destruction of the last remaining crusaders, refuge in the Holy Land, and Pope Clement V dissolved the Knights Templar in 1312. In 1291 could be considered the end of the Crusades, though the church organized minor crusades with limited goals after 1291. So you still start to see the importance of that as well. Here's some things to note on the Middle Ages. The Great Schism. 1054, a divide between the Eastern and Western churches, the Church of Rome versus the Church of Constantinople, came about due to a complex mix of religious disagreements and political conflicts. Point of concerns included the use of unleavened bread in communion, the Nicene Creed, and the celibacy of the clergy. These two sections were turned into the Roman Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox Church. The Catholic Church, Middle Ages. Catholic Church became the most powerful institution of medieval period. Kings, queens, and other leaders derived much of their power from their alliance with and protection of the Church. Pope Leo III in 800 CE, he named Frankish King Charlemagne. Charlemagne's realm became the Holy Roman Empire, one of the several political entities in Europe whose interests tended to align with those of the Church. Charlemagne, ordinary people across Europe had to tithe 10% of their earnings each year to the church. At the same time, the church was mostly exempt from taxation. Peter Waldo is a person you need to know because he believed in the voluntary poverty and religious simplification. Waldo's followers, considered heretics by the church, his protests against doctrines and practices of the Roman Catholic Church were strong tremors foretelling the coming spiritual awakening or spiritual earthquake called the Reformation. So Peter Waldo was the first person to really sound the alarm because of what he did, which makes it interesting. You start to see something was going on with this Reformation movement that was about to occur. Waldo was prohibited by the bishop from preaching, but Waldo understood that he was unable to be hindered from sharing the truth of the gospel because of the biblical command to go and to teach the world. The Third Lateran Council ruled that preaching should only be done with the permission from a bishop. Waldo's quoted saying, Peter and the apostles replied, "We must obey God rather than human beings." Look at Columba in 521 to 97. He evangelized much of Scotland and labored on the island of Iona for 34 years. Augustine of Canterbury evangelized Britain, not to be confused with Augustine of Hippo, the converted king who then required the people to daily hear the gospel. Augustine removed idols from the pagan shrine, purified buildings with holy water, and charged them into churches. Boniface from 672 to 7254 preached the gospel. Germany and Belgium died martyred. Francis Assisi evangelized much of Italy, abandoned monetary luxuries to serve the poor and share the gospel among the heathens. John Wycliffe, in 1384, spent a mostly quiet life as a student and teacher at Oxford University. He began reforms in the late 8 or 9 years of his life. Wycliffe had a high view on the importance of the authority of the Bible. Wycliffe emphasized the importance of the laity in church life. People could interpret the Bible for themselves. Wycliffe wanted all people to have the Bible in their own language. So there you can kind of get a sense of some of the moving parts of this particular medieval period. You can sense what's coming next, which we will have an opportunity to share, which is just the Reformation age from 1615 to 1900. So we have a small window here, but a lot can get done as we put it together. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in to the Patio Professor. I'm Dr. Mark Johnson. May God bless you and keep you in his perfect peace.